The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
Is your legal name Lori Daybell?
It is.
She's lost her mind. I don't know how to say it.
Was any crime even committed? And where is this evidence?
Did you hear any statements of her wanting to harm or kill Charles?
No, other than she used the word destroy.
Prior to my incarceration, I did study procedure in family law, and I have real trial experience.
Counselor Cult Mom's trial kicks off today in Arizona. We've got our power panel weighing in on just how her opening statement is going to go. And we're spotlighting the holes in Daybell's investigation, both literally and figuratively. An investigator joins us here in the studio to break down the shooting death of victim Charles Vallow. Also this hour, comedian Russell Brand accused of rape and sex assault in the United Kingdom. The celebrity is addressing the allegations head on. Plus, defendant Dr. Ingolf Turk set to take the stand this week. We're talking about how his testimony might tip the scales of justice. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Monday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host, Julie Grant. Are you ready for what I'd like to say, some coffee and some court this morning? We got a tremendous show planned with sensational guests, so let's get it going. Grab that cup of coffee or tea or whatever you like in the morning. It's time for my opening statement. Charles Vallow told police that his wife, Lori, threatened to kill him and promised that nobody would care. Oh, no. Oh, no. No. We care. All of us courties all over the world care about what happened to Charles Vallow and to J.J. Vallow and to Tylee Ryan and to Tammy Daybell. By all accounts, Charles Vallow was a kind, loving, smart, talented man and a devoted father and husband. He was so smart, he figured out the conspiracy long before investigators ever did. He tried to warn Tammy Daybell about the affair, and he confronted Chad and Lori directly. What a good, honest man he was. Charles Vallow's two sons deserve to have their father here with them today. His sister, Kay Woodcock, and his brother-in-law, Larry, deserve to have him here today. You know, my friends, Charles's case might be the third trial to go, but it is no less important. Charles Vallow is remembered in the very best way. And may he finally get justice. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
And in this case, what you heard was that the defendant deceived everybody. She deceived her family. She deceived her friends. She deceived Fabio's colleagues, and worst of all, she deceived her husband and her children.
In California, the state's case in their closing arguments continue today in the murder trial against Monica Sementilli. Court's going to start back up at noon. In Hawaii, we have Gerhard Koning's arraignment scheduled for today. He is the doctor accused of trying to murder his wife after she said he tried to push her off a cliff. That's going to start up at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. We will be following that closely for you. And in Arizona, oh, it's a big day for counselor cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell. Opening statement starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and there is a 30-minute delay, so as soon as that 30 minutes is up, you're going to see it all here live. And that is, of course, our top story this morning. Lori Vallow representing herself in her trial after being charged with conspiracy to commit murder in the death of course, her husband, Charles Vallow. Now, mostly male jury has been seated in this one with 13 men. Wow, it's a lot of men. And 3 women. Only 3. Now, just days before the start of her trial, Daybell sat down with True Crime Arizona, revealing why she decided to represent herself.
Obviously, being pro per is not an easy job. I'm not an attorney. I don't have training to be an attorney. There's something that I figured out when I got to this jail. You know, this experience has been 5 years running. I came here with the intention of having a speedy trial, right? I wanted to, these charges came first, right? So they're like 5 years old. So I, first talked to the attorneys. I was like, they've had 5 years, the prosecutors, to put their case together, and I really want to go to trial. Like, we need to go.
So how will Lori do giving her opening statement? We can't wait for this. How about you? I can't wait to bring in this power panel we have assembled this morning. Let's welcome them all. In the studio with me, I have Charles Middlestat and Michael Sterling, and joining us remotely, Tommy Pope. Good morning to you all. Michael, let me begin with you here, please. The opening statements. Lori needs some tips as the defense attorney. What does she need to do today?
Well, she needs to do a lot. I find it very interesting. She goes from legally incompetent to stay in trial to now she's got trial experience and she's a skilled criminal defense attorney. But what she needs to do is tell a very specific narrative, right? Make sure she has a theme and a theory and lay it out very clearly for the jurors, right? If she's done any studying, as she said she has, she understands what a theory is, what a theme is. It is a narrative that it is a overall picture that allows a jury to sort of follow your story. And so she needs to lay it out very clearly, have a very identifiable theme, a very identifiable theory, and say, this is why I should not be convicted, and this is what the evidence is going to show you.
Right. Well said, Michael. So that interview with True Crime Arizona, she talked about some of the biggest challenges she thinks she's going to have during this case. Let's all take a look together at that.
The biggest challenge for me in this trial will be the logistics. I want to be able to go and talk to the people who have stood up and lied about me. I get to face them face to face. I think that's important.
Now, she also said in this same interview that she's been wrongfully convicted of the three other homicides, but that's beside the point. Let's focus on the instant homicide with Charles Vallow. Tommy Pope, you prosecuted one of the most famous cases in America of a bad mom, the Susan Smith case. You're responsible for putting that woman behind bars, and she's still there to this day. You know what it's like to be in front of the cameras, the pressure. You're a state lawmaker. Now you get it. The media is swirling this morning. What are the stakes like for the prosecution in this one?
You know, you and I have talked about it before in a number of cases, that their job's to stay focused. And it's extremely difficult when you have a defendant representing themselves, because the judge normally gives the defendant wide latitude. You can tell this is her additional 15 minutes of fame. I think she's enjoyed it. I watched the Arizona video you were talking about, and I wonder where they get curling irons in prison, because she is all primed up and ready to go. And I think in her opening, I think in the case, I think in cross-examining witnesses, you know, one, you're not going to have the structure that the guys with you or I would object to if you got outside. So that's going to be more difficult. So again, the prosecutors just got to focus and hope she kind of runs amok and that the jury takes that in. We always talk about not being able to see the jury when we're watching sometimes, and I was a juror watcher, always wondering, and I was wrong about 50% of the time, but you know, reading their faces and trying to determine how they're taking her can kind of structure, you know, how far they go and kind of snapping back even at her in the courtroom.
Sure. Great points, Tommy. You mentioned her hair, and we've gotten a lot of questions about this, so I feel like it's an appropriate time to bring it up. We looked into this. Apparently, she sleeps with wet towels. She was a hairstylist before she became locked up, and so she wraps her hair to get those pretty curls. And apparently, in Arizona, they can buy makeup at the commissary. So every state is unique, and apparently she can buy some makeup there. So when we see her made up in some of these interviews, apparently she can choose some lipstick there when she needs it. So for this trial, I expect her to be, fully, dressed and looking her best. And we know there's a lot of men on that jury. Charles Middlestat, let me bring you in on that point. So 13 men. We know one of the themes in her trial in Idaho was manipulation, that she was using sex to manipulate Chad Daybell. And do you expect her to do some manipulating with the jury in this one?
I certainly anticipate that she thinks she's going to be able to. I mean, listen, that certainly works in her favor. It gives her an opportunity to exercise what I'm certain she views as her own charm and to try to manipulate these men. I mean, manipulation is, you know, something that clearly somebody with her personality profile is very adept at. And so I assume she's going to go with her strengths. I don't know if she had a jury consultant involved in the selection of this jury or not, but you know, it seems to bode in her favor.
Right. You would hope she would. But you have to wonder, Michael, I mean, you know how she just thinks she knows best. I wonder if she would even listen. What do you think?
Well, I believe she had a counsel advisor, so she has actually a barred attorney sitting next to her, giving her some advice. At least she has that. I don't think she had a jury consultant, but I imagine that the lawyer who was sitting next to her were telling her, here are certain things you need to look for in jurors, and, you know, because it's really not juror selection, it's really juror deselection. You're trying to make sure you get people who can be fair and impartial, and you don't let somebody on a juror who's got a predetermined mindset about your guilt or innocence.
Right, exactly. Weed those people out. I have a post I want to share with you all from Kay Woodcock. This lovely woman has been through so much, as you all know. This is Charles Vallow's sister, and she's also the grandmother of little JJ Vallow. If we remember, Charles adopted JJ. He belonged to another relative who was unable to take care of him, and so Lori and Charles took him in, and take a look at this. She's saying, justice for Charles Vallow finally begins tomorrow. Been a long, tumultuous journey. My sweet brother, watching from heaven, we pray for earthly justice as it's the best we can hope for. We love and miss you lots. Tommy Pope, what would you be saying to Kay Woodcock if you're the prosecutor on this as she's arrived in Arizona to watch this trial?
You know, I would tell her to focus on the evidence, try not to focus on the defendant's antics, because it's torturous for the victims. You know, I always explained on like death penalty cases, you know, it becomes all about the defendant, and you rarely hear about the victim, and you know it's going to be amplified with her representing herself. I mean, the video you're showing now, how much she enjoys being there. You know, she's really got nothing to lose. She's having fun being in the camera's eye, and you can't let that part torture you, because it will. You know, we talked about David Smith, you know, as hard as it is every 2 years going to parole hearings, if she got out and disappeared, it'd be good. But if Susan, you know, was on social media or on reality TV within the 3 months, it would be a worse torture. And so it's kind of the same thing for her, you know, that you got to just put aside the fact that Lori is enjoying the time of her life and being the center of attention.
Yeah, she really is. There's some similarities between Lori and Susan Smith, aren't there, Tommy? Thank you for that. Charles, let me go to you, please, on the prosecution's evidence against her. So we know with this case, we have a couple interesting factors at play. The man who killed Charles Vallow is Lori's brother, her protector, Alex Cox, who is also dead. So we have interviews, we have statements, but we don't have him as a joined co-defendant, although they call him an unindicted co-conspirator in all of the pleadings. And then we also have her not present at the home. She was driving through Burger King at the time that the shooting happened. How do you think these factors of her not being present and not getting her hands dirty are going to come in here?
Well, the interesting thing about this particular case is that actually none of the witnesses are alive, right? So you, Tylee, JJ, Alex, Charles, the decedent, they're all not present. And so this case is largely going to be tried on, I assume, exceptions that will allow their prior statements to come in the form of body camera footage and other statements, including statements that she may have made at some point. So it's really a case that's sort of being tried from many graves, and it puts the prosecution at a disadvantage. This is, frankly, the most defensible of all our cases. And so, you know, it's a very, very interesting dynamic. The fact that she was not there, again, with regard to the prosecution's theory that she was a co-conspirator and this was premeditated. We'll sort of have to see how they kind of weave that together and what sort of evidence exists to further that theory on the prosecution's part. But obviously we haven't seen that yet, but that'll be very, very interesting to see what that looks like.
Excellent points, Charles. Boy, I got chills. I loved how you said this is being tried from many graves, many people's graves. It's true. You're exactly right. And you hit on something really big. Of all the cases, you're right. This is the most defensible one. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. This is the one case where you actually have a bona fide self-defense claim, as opposed to the other cases. And the fact that this one is going last is kind of, to Attorney Pope's point, you don't really have anything to lose, right? She's already going to spend the rest of her life in prison, unless by some miracle it's overturned on appeal. But there's really nothing for her to lose. And it is a defensible case, but you don't have any witnesses, right? So it's going to be interesting just to see how the evidence plays out, how the prosecution is able to present their evidence, how Lori, if she does put on a case in chief, is able to present some of the body cam footage that might be helpful to her case. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. And also, despite the fact that she's been in the public's eye for so long and people know so much about her, the question becomes, it kind of reminds you of when OJ had the case in Las Vegas, right? Because he had been in the public's eye for so long and people knew so much about him, you get jurors who say, yes, I can set aside any pre-existing notions I might have. But the question becomes, how much does that play into this case?
Right, that's a great point. Michael, Charles, Tommy, thank you all so much. We're not done talking about Lori Vallow Daybell, my friends. Our coverage of Cult Mom continues here on Opening Statements.
Gotcha. How long have you guys lived here?
I'm sorry?
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors took the last.
Gotcha.
Like, hi, neighbor, sorry.
Are there any holes in the case investigation? Well, there was a hole found in the floor after Charles Vallow was shot. We're going to talk about it. Plus, celebrity Russell Brand facing rape and sex assault charges in the United Kingdom, but he's firing back and denying any wrongdoing.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Welcome back. Comedian Russell Brand is what's trending in true crime this morning, and the latest headlines could be pointing to an alarming pattern for the entertainer. Friday, British police charging Brand with rape and sex assault. This comes on the heels of an 18-month-long investigation which started after 4 women claimed that they were assaulted by the controversial comic. Now, the allegations date back between the years 1999 and 2005. 3 of the 4 women claim the offenses happened in London. Now, Brand, who's 50 years old, has denied engaging in any non-consensual sexual acts. This isn't his first run-in with similar allegations, but he addressed the recent claims via X. Take a look.
We're very fortunate in a way to live in a time where there's so little trust in the British government. We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon. I've always told you guys that when I was young and single, before I had my wife and family, we're just out of shot over there, my beautiful children, I was a fool, man. I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord. I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes.
Brand's due in court on May the 2nd. We're asking, will these charges stick? Let's bring back in attorney Tommy Pope and welcome in domestic violence expert, former law enforcement officer, and podcast host Claudia King. Claudia, let me begin with you here, please. 4 women coming forward, first civilly, and then that spawned the criminal investigation. Does it sound to you like these charges may stick?
I think they could, and the reason I say that is because the police did such a lengthy investigation. And second to that, we know that prosecutors, generally speaking, only want to charge cases that they believe that they can move forward through the process that ends in a guilty verdict or a guilty plea. So the fact that they made these charges does make me think that they believe they have enough evidence to find Mr. Brand guilty on at least some of these charges.
Claudia, thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. This is not good for Mr. Brand. Perhaps good for justice if these accusers are being truthful. Tommy, would you speak to the investigation that has to go on? You know, not only are you an attorney, but you're also a retired SLED agent as well. So when someone comes forth with a civil complaint, that's one thing. But then when investigators look into it and say, oh no, this also belongs in criminal court, it's quite another, isn't it?
Sure, and you know, for your viewers, you know, of course, the civil case has a lesser burden of proof, and so they're quite candidly, they're easier to get going. They're easier to bring in collateral information that you can't bring in a criminal case. The age of these cases makes it hard. Sexual assault cases are hard anyway because you basically heard his defense earlier, which is consent. So you're not. Suddenly, DNA doesn't matter, and apparently, you know, I wouldn't think that long ago they would have had, you know, that. But, you know, the normal evidence you'd have in a recent assault normally is not available, and so it's going to be difficult. I was thinking about the, you know, prosecutor. You know, going forward, so there must be enough. It's interesting. I don't know how they do it in England. You know, the feds got to kind of choose the cases before they were indicted. You know, as a state prosecutor, we kind of got handed whatever law enforcement did. And I remember one guy, he said, I'm going to charge them all with murder. Tommy Pope will have to figure out if it's murder or not. And so, you know, I don't know what states are, but when it gets to the prosecution, you may see some of them whittled down or moved. But it's hard because you got victims of something. You know, the allegation's very, very egregious. And so it's going to be interesting, and it's difficult for law enforcement. It's difficult for the prosecution, but of course it's difficult to defend too. It's going to be hard all the way around.
Really great points. Tommy, thank you for that. And as we said earlier, Russell Brand has faced some similar claims of sex assault in previous years. So we've put together a look at some of what's been brought against him. This is all from the Associated Press. September of 2023, this is when these 4 unidentified women claimed that they were sexually assaulted or raped by Brand. From 2006 to 2008, 5 complaints were recorded by BBC employees against Brand during his time as a radio host there. The 4 women and these recent claims also remain unnamed this morning, but now Brand has been charged with rape as part of this latest wave of allegations. And we're asking this morning, could these newest allegations point to an alarming pattern for Brand? Claudia, I want to get your thoughts, please, when we have not just 1, not just 2, but 4 women coming forward alleging this type of misconduct.
I definitely think that could be an alarming pattern, and the fact that there are 4, you know, leads me to believe that there could be some truth to it. Now, you would have to look at, do these women know each other? Do they have any connection at all? Are their stories similar to one another? If there are certain patterns or things that each of them said that makes it seem more true because each of them said it, so it's the same pattern with each woman, that would make you think it's true as well. And then the fact that there were these other allegations or complaints previously, you know, I think shows a potential problem. And what I find interesting in his statement, you know, he said he was a drug addict, he was a sex addict. You know, to me, that is a problem because, well, how can he say he remembers everything that happened or that he didn't potentially do something when he wasn't fully coherent or in his right mind because he was on drugs or doing something else that he shouldn't have been doing?
Claudia, that's an outstanding point. Thank you for that. Tommy, I would love your thoughts on the point Claudia just made.
I think she's spot on because he does have to defend it, and I think, there's these consensual versus non-consensual, reckless behavior thing. I think it sounds like to me, they're going to be able to show he was there wherever there was, and that, and it's going to be tough, as Claudia said, for him to defend the consensual aspect You know, and that was a great point, especially if he's checked out on drugs or whatever. You know, I was curious as to why it came up, when it came up. You know, that would be of interest. I think the fact that he now, you know, has a stable situation, at least some jurors will look at that. But, you know, and the fact that a civil suit was filed first, you know, we talked about the burden of proof, but I used to always try to ask my victims to wait so it doesn't end up looking like they're really just in it for money or attention. And finally, you know, the fact that he was famous, it's going to be interesting. You know, I've had cases in the past where somebody, you know, affluent or famous, people wanted to get with them, and then maybe it got out of hand, and that's what it sounds like could have happened here. And so there's a tremendous number of factors. It's going to be a very complicated case, both to try and to defend.
You're exactly right. Tommy Pope, Claudia King, great insight from you both. Thank you much. We got to leave it there for now. Still to come here on Opening Statements. Cult Mom's trial kicks off today, and we're looking at her investigation. We'll talk about the bullet holes found near Charles's body and what they tell us. Plus, Dr. Ingolf Turk set to take the stand in his own defense. Could he tip the scales of justice in his homicide case?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
Welcome back. This morning, we're shining a spotlight on the Daybell investigation, looking for any holes, both figuratively and literally. So from the get-go, Lori Vallow Daybell has been adamant that the investigation is problematic.
My complaint is the interference by the state, Ms. Kay in particular, in stopping that and interfering with us trying to investigate and do our own investigation. I don't know what she did or what she said to Chandler and Gilbert to stop them from giving us any information, but as soon as we put in a request, we were cut off. We haven't been given things we've asked the state for. We haven't been given them. We tried to get them from Chandler and Gilbert. We can't get them from them. She's stopping us from getting from them. How are you supposed to put together a defense?
So are there actually any holes in this investigation, or is this just wishful thinking from a woman who some would say has a problem with the truth? Well, that's putting it mildly, right? Let's bring back in Michael Sterling and Charles Middlestat. Okay, so let's dissect this. Cult Mom is saying that she is falsely accused of, she has never admitted any guilt, even with the 3 murders she's been convicted of and serving life sentences for. She said recently to True Crime Arizona, not me, wasn't me, I didn't do this. Michael, we touched on earlier how this is a defensible case. Do you think she's going to be smart enough to latch on to the things that a great defense attorney like yourself would be latching on to if you tried it?
No. I mean, being candid, right. Like you don't get to become a defense attorney who's practicing at the highest levels, defending some of the most important cases in the country by accident. It's trial, it's training, it's experience, it's studying the craft, it's being dedicated, committed to it. So no, someone who has not passed the bar exam, has not spent considerable amount of time doing this and honing in on this craft is not going to have the necessary skills. But that doesn't mean she can't win. Right? So you don't expect a performance, and I'm not praising myself, but don't expect a Michael Sterling type performance from Lori.
Yeah, we're not going to see that yet. We're tempering our expectations.
But
and we've seen you perform. You're sensational. We saw you try a case on Court TV. We broadcasted it.
But it does.
She's not going to look like that, folks.
But it does not mean she can't win, right? We had another case on Court TV we covered where the defendant represented himself pro se. I believe it was a case out of
Wisconsin, Darrell Brooks.
No, not the Darrell Brooks, but he ended up with a hung jury, and then later took a plea to a lesser included offense.
In Florida, I know the guy you're talking about, Ty something. I can't remember his last name. Somebody in the control room help me out.
He didn't put
Ty Tucker.
Right.
Yes,
but
thank you, Annette.
He didn't put on a good performance either, but he got a hung jury. So all you have to do is find that one juror who's willing to say, I'm not quite convinced beyond a reasonable doubt of her guilt.
Yeah.
Right? And if you find that one juror, you can get there. So don't expect a stellar performance from her, but that does not mean she doesn't have a chance of coming out victorious in this case.
Michael, I'm glad you mentioned that. And big shout out. too, our wonderful producer, Annette Smith, who's brilliant and gave me that. Ty Tucker, you're right. He's a great example of somebody who kind of shocked all of us that it wasn't as bad as we thought it would be. I mean, again, in the world of pro se defendants, that is. Okay, so Charles Middlestat, do we have something special for you? We wanted to bring you in this morning to dig into a hole in the floor, a bullet hole. So let's take a listen to Alex Cox, who we know shot and killed Charles Vallow, describing it. And then we're going to show you what investigators found when they surveyed the property.
So he's basically coming at you and he's yelling. You're watching his body language.
Yeah.
And you said you told him, and I didn't, when we're talking, I'm not going to try to not take notes and listen to what you're saying.
I'm trying to calm the situation.
Okay.
I'm going to drop your bat, and then he's you and whatever coming at me.
Did you ever tell him to leave, or did you say drop the bat, or?
First, I just said drop the bat.
Okay. And then did you say anything else after that?
I didn't have time.
But then, crime scene investigators found something different. So we know that Charles Vallow was shot once in the chest, and the second shot was fired while he was apparently on the ground. Let me read. I have something in front of me. I don't know if that's what was just on the screen. I think we may not have the matching information, but what I wanted to say was one of the gunshot wounds resulted in him being on the ground. The bullet strike was located underneath his body, the projectile next to his left shoulder. Alex Cox was asked if Charles was standing during both the shots, and we heard him reply that he was standing up. So how does that happen? How does a bullet hole get in the floor next to his shoulder if he was standing up? Charles Middlestat, does that make any sense to you?
No, that would seem to be inconsistent with Cox's testimony. Is the fact that if you have a round that clearly was, the trajectory is downward, right, that would suggest that at that point, it's either an errant shot or Cox is on the ground and Charles Vallow is on the ground and Cox is aiming in a downward trajectory at him, which again would be completely inconsistent with his testimony. Now, with that said, he never got charged, or there wasn't sufficient time for him to get charged prior to his death. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that evidence really looks like. And the overlay to that is what the autopsy report is going to show in terms of the angle of the wound to his chest, and also whether there's any ability to determine the proximity in terms of stippling or other physical evidence that would give us some insights into what that looked like. And again, this is all going to be, this is why we don't ever want, as a defense team, you never want clients making statements, because those statements then can be dissected and can be examined for their veracity vis-a-vis the evidence, physical evidence, or other forms of evidence. And so he's on the record, and now the physical evidence is going to determine whether that lines up with his claims.
Right. Well said, Charles. What do you think might have happened? Your best educated guess on how we have that one shot in the floor?
Well, again, not having seen the autopsy report, I don't know. Is my understanding correct that he was struck one time?
One shot in the chest. At least that's our understanding.
And
yes,
that 2 rounds, we've determined that 2 rounds were fired.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's hard to, not having heard his entire statement, it's hard for me to sort of speculate as to what that looks like. But clearly, that's inconsistent with the portion that we did hear in terms of what his claim is, which was both shots were fired while Vallow was in a standing position, and in response to feeling threatened by a baseball bat, and so that was his self-defense claim. But clearly, that one shot defies that statement, and the rest is going to be interesting to see sort of how that plays out.
Right, Charles. I know we're also curious if could it have been that he was trying to put another round in him after he was already on the ground? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I assume that's what the prosecution is going to argue, is that this was went beyond self-defense,
Right.
and that was an attempted kill shot.
Right. What do you think, Michael?
Well, I think speculation favors a defense, right? Because when the jury is left to speculate, right, you get to argue in your closing statements, hey, we don't convict people based on speculation. We don't convict people based on conjecture. You cannot guess somebody guilty. So there could be another argument, right? That was a warning shot before the first shot. So instead of trying to actually shoot him, that was actually the first shot in the ground where he maybe shot a warning shot saying, hey, put that baseball bat down. And then when he couldn't, right, because we don't have him here to testify, and when he didn't and he continued to attack him, then that's when he actually felt like, right? But either way, I think when there's that type of speculation, this kind of guesswork that's left, it favors the defense because you get to raise reasonable doubt.
Right.
And the issue is that, you know, he's not here to be cross-examined. Right. So we're going to be left with his statement and the physical evidence in the case.
Right. You both are right. How we wish he could be here. They could be joined together as co-defendants, and maybe we would get to the truth. Such great insight from you both. Michael, Charles, thank you kindly. We're going to hit a break. When we come back, we're talking about Dr. Ingolf Turk. He's going to take the stand, so he says. Will his testimony help or hurt him at his trial?
Is that the text that you received from Kurt that morning?
Yes.
And what does it say?
Kurt, I am sorry, brother, but she's a vindictive devil. She played us all. I am really sorry, brother, but she manipulated us all.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
Now for what's tipping the scales of justice, the state's expected to rest today when the surgeon strangles wife. Murder trial resumes at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Defendant Dr. Ingolf Turk could be taking the stand as early as tomorrow. He's accused of killing his wife, Katie McLean, after the two of them got into an argument after a night together of drinking. Now, she was last seen on May 14th, 2020 at their home, and her body was found some days later in a pond after Turk eventually told police where he had left her.
We're going to go find it. And we can get through this. We can get through this. I know this is going to be difficult. There's no way getting around it. We can't leave her up there alone, Harry. We can't. We can't do that to her.
So the defense team here doesn't deny that Turk killed his wife. They're acknowledging that he did. But what they're saying is this wasn't a premeditated murder. They're saying that this was something lesser. So it's all about intent at the time. So could his testimony tip the scales? Let's bring in our guests. Still with me, Charles Middlestat and Michael Sterling. Okay, Charles, let me begin with you. You're a tremendous defense investigator. That's what you do, dig in for defense teams and give testimony at trials. Here, I'm sure they've got a Charles Middlestat up in Boston who worked this case with them. What do you think? Do you think this is smart for Dr. Turk to get up there and walk the jury through the process, how things got to the fatal incident?
In terms of him testifying in his own defense?
What do you think?
I mean, I think it's always risky. You know, you have great defense lawyers that do all this great lawyering and make great arguments and suppress evidence and you know, do the real heavy lifting. And then when a defendant elects to testify in their own defense, literally all of that is gone. It's all the work, and it really just comes down to one thing, whether the jury believes the defendant or not. And so the defendant ends up assuming single-handedly the entire burden for their defense in doing so. And so that's always a very, very difficult decision. It's obviously a decision that counsel advises for or against, and sometimes, and you know, I've been a part of many defense teams where defendants have just been insistent on testifying. They want to be heard, and they don't take advice of counsel, and it has generally not worked out in their favor.
Right. Yeah, sometimes they
sometimes it's the only way. There's no other option.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have to testify.
Sure.
But it's perilous.
It's right. I know. I always say they rarely help themselves. But Michael Sterling, what do you think? In this case, he's talked a lot already, as we know. He gave a lot of interviews with police, walked everybody through it. What would you advise him?
See, I would say don't take the stand, right? Typically, if the prosecution is going to let my client testify without being subjected to cross-examination, which is the body cam, the interviews, anything you've done, he's already said enough. So you've already given your version multiple times. There's no point in putting you on the stand and subjecting you to cross-examination when you were able to actually tell your part of the story without taking the witness stand.
Sure.
So typically, if I have that kind of evidence, I won't put my client on the stand. And sometimes, to Charles's point, there's a jury instruction that says one witness, if believed, is sufficient enough, right? So you wonder, once your client takes the stand, everything else goes, it goes out the window. And I tell my clients, if you want to take the stand, the case is now out of my hands and it's in yours. Mm-hmm. What you do is going to determine what this juror comes back with. Right? So it's not on me anymore. Now it's on you. You're the star, not me.
Right.
And so it is a very risky proposition, especially in a case where you're basically admitting guilt but trying to get the jury to mitigate, right? And typically in a self-defense case, my client may take the stand, right? Because
Cornisha Johnson, that case we broadcasted, right?
And the juror split it, right? The juror said, we kind of believe her. So the prosecution was saying, hey, this was premeditated. She went in the house intending to kill him. She says it was self-defense. And the jury came back and said, we believe her sort of, right?
Right.
So they gave her the lesser included.
Right. So that's a win for you, not getting murdered.
The jury's unlikely to really like him just based upon the fact that he puts his wife in a pond, right?
Right.
It's one thing if, in fact, this was a unintentional act or heat of passion sort of thing that was not premeditated and it resulted in a tragic death. But to then take the next step to actually conceal her body and put her in a pond and all that, that shows deprivation. That's something that a jury's not going to like, and that's something that he will have to answer for in cross-examination.
Right. Charles, I'm so glad you brought that up. I think we have time to play this quick clip from the medical examiner when we learned about the rocks that were put inside her pants to weigh her down. Take a look.
Is this one of the rocks that was in Katie McLean's pants when she was brought into your office?
Yes.
And do you recognize this as the other rock that came out of the pants of Katie McLean?
Yes.
Ooh, so that was a moment, as you both know. Charles, to your point, if this was just a heat of passion kind of thing, the guy's a doctor, right? He could try to save her, give her, CPR, but no, he takes the pond route.
Just consider for 1 second what that would be like for a human being to literally stuff rocks in the pants pockets of someone that they presumably loved, right? That's, again, that sort of deprivation, emotional deprivation, detachment that is so callous that that's hard for a jury to sort of get beyond that and have any sort of, favorable or objective consideration towards this defendant.
I think you're right. That was a moment. It stuck with all of us, and I bet it stuck with that jury. Michael, tell me, when it comes to moments, we were talking off camera, you never know really what a jury is going to do. And quickly with this one, do you think that at the end of the day, the jury could possibly find that this was something less than murder?
I think it's going to be tough, right? Because, your actions after have a lot of effect on what the jurors did, and this does make it look intentional, right? Those rocks, hiding the body, doing those things afterwards, the jury can't consider that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We've got to leave it there just for the time being. That's all for this episode of Opening Statements, my friends. I'm your host, Julie Grant, and it's been great being with you. On this show, I am calling out any pants on fire moments in our big trials and true crime stories, and I want you to come along with me. Opening Statements is live every weekday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern on Court TV. Thank you for downloading this episode. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. You can watch past shows anytime you like on CourtTV.com.